Welcome to Vietnam in 60 Seconds, where history comes alive and the stories behind Vietnam's past reveal a side of the world few people ever truly see. When people think of spies, they think of James Bond, a tuxedo, a gun, a beautiful lie. They think of gadgets, car chases, martinis, and a man who always seems one step ahead of danger. But what if I told you the greatest spy of the 20th century didn't look anything like James Bond? He didn't seduce information out of strangers. He didn't break into embassies at midnight. He didn't carry a license to kill. Instead, he wore a pressed shirt, sat quietly in Saigon cafés, smoked with generals, shared drinks with American correspondents, and wrote for some of the biggest Western news organizations in the world. To the Americans, he was charming, intelligent, and trustworthy. A respected journalist, a political insider, a man who understood Vietnam better than almost anyone else around him. But behind that calm smile was one of the most devastating intelligence assets of the entire Vietnam War. For years, the United States and the South Vietnamese government treated him like a friend. They invited him into briefing rooms. They trusted him with strategy. They spoke freely in front of him. And almost everything they said was quietly making its way to the other side. His name was Pham Xuan An, a journalist, a patriot, a man living a double life with perfect composure. Some called him the perfect spy. Today, we're telling the story of the man who may have been the real-life 007 of Vietnam, except his greatest weapon was not violence, it was trust. To understand Pham Xuan An, you have to begin with a paradox. He was a communist intelligence officer who genuinely admired America. He loved American culture. He loved its energy, its openness, its journalism, its confidence, and its habit of asking difficult questions. And that was not a weakness in his cover story. It was the foundation of it. In 1957, An was sent to the United States to study journalism in California. Think about that for a moment. In the middle of the Cold War, a future communist spy was being trained not in sabotage, but in reporting. At Orange Coast College, he studied journalism the American way. How reporters investigated facts, how editors shaped narratives, how newspapers influenced public opinion. But perhaps even more importantly, he studied Americans themselves, how they thought, how they argued, how they trusted, how they underestimated the people they believed they understood. And Pham Xuan An was good at this world, very good. He made friends easily. He blended in naturally. He absorbed the rhythm of American life so completely that when he returned to Vietnam, he did not need to pretend to be a Western-style journalist. He had become one. That distinction matters, because the most dangerous spies are not the ones who simply act a role. They are the ones who become it. When An returned to Saigon in 1959, he stepped into a city that was about to become one of the central battlefields of the Cold War. And he entered it with the perfect disguise. Not a fake passport, not a stolen identity, but a profession that allowed him to ask questions and be rewarded for it. He worked for Reuters. Later, he became a correspondent for Time magazine. Now picture the scene. Saigon in the 1960s. American officials, South Vietnamese generals, CIA officers, foreign correspondents, whiskey glasses clinking in hotel bars, cigarette smoke drifting over military maps. And in the middle of it all, Pham Xuan An, listening, observing, remembering, analyzing. He was not pretending to understand the war. He actually understood it better than many of the men running it. And that is when the operation truly began. Most people imagine espionage as theft, breaking into safes, stealing files, planting bugs behind paintings. Pham Xuan An's genius was different. He did not need to steal his way into the room. He was invited in. As a respected journalist, he had access to military briefings, political insiders, and senior figures on both the American and South Vietnamese side. People wanted to talk to him. They wanted his opinion. They trusted his judgment. Some even admired him. At the famous Givral Café in Saigon, sometimes called the unofficial parliament of journalists, spies, and politicians, An became a legendary figure. He was witty, calm, well-informed. The kind of man who could explain a military crisis over coffee with the clarity of a professor and the charm of an old friend. And while others saw a journalist with remarkable connections, the revolution saw something else, a strategic treasure. Because An wasn't just collecting gossip, he was collecting the inner logic of the war. How American commanders assessed the battlefield, what they feared, what they misunderstood, what they planned to do next. He reportedly photographed classified documents, summarized military plans, and passed crucial intelligence through a secret revolutionary network. These were not random scraps of information. These were reports, assessments, operational insights, the kind of intelligence that can change how an army prepares, moves, or survives. And the brilliance of his work was that it looked so ordinary. No explosions, no dramatic escapes across rooftops, no cinematic dead drops in dark alleyways. Instead, there were notes, microfilm, photographs, carefully hidden materials, and a courier network willing to risk everything to move them. The real suspense of Pham Xuan An's life was not action. It was exposure. One wrong question, one suspicious glance, one intercepted message, one friend who noticed too much. That was all it would take for the entire life he had built to collapse. And yet for years, it didn't. Because his greatest skill was not theatrical deception, it was emotional discipline. He knew how to be useful. He knew how to be likable. He knew how to speak just enough and hold back just enough to make everyone feel safe around him. That is why comparing him to James Bond is both tempting and completely misleading. Bond survives by spectacle. An survived by becoming forgettable at exactly the right moments. Bond enters a room and everyone notices. Pham Xuan An entered a room and everyone relaxed. But reducing Pham Xuan An to a spy who stole secrets would miss what made him truly extraordinary. He was not just an information courier, he was an analyst. In many ways, his value came not only from what he could access, but from what he could understand. Remember, he had lived in America. He knew the language, the culture, the press, and the psychology of American power. He knew how US officials framed success. He knew how military briefings could hide failure behind statistics. He knew how public messaging and battlefield reality were often two very different things. That made him uniquely dangerous, because when information reached him, it didn't stay as raw data. He interpreted it. He could look at a report, a conversation, a shift in tone from an American officer, and understand what it really meant, where the pressure points were, which operation mattered, which plan was serious, which strategy was only political theater. This is one of the reasons his intelligence was so highly valued by the North Vietnamese leadership, not because he merely passed along papers, but because he helped explain the mind of the enemy. And in war, that can be more valuable than 1,000 pages of documents. Over time, Pham Xuan An became one of the most important intelligence sources the communist side had inside Saigon. He lived at the center of the anti-communist world while secretly serving the revolution. Imagine the strain of that existence. Day after day, year after year, surrounded by men who trusted you, men who would be destroyed if they ever learned who you really were. This is where the legend of the perfect spy becomes something darker, because perfection in espionage comes with a cost, a terrible one. To maintain the cover, you cannot fully belong to either world. To the Americans, he could never reveal his true loyalties. To many on his own side, he could never reveal the full emotional complexity of the life he was living. He was trusted by one camp and owned by another, praised publicly in one identity, erased privately in the other. That kind of life doesn't simply require courage. It requires the ability to split yourself in two and keep both halves alive. As the Vietnam War escalated, the world around Pham Xuan An became more violent, more chaotic, and more desperate. American strategy shifted. Governments rose and fell. Cities became battlegrounds. The war consumed families, villages, and entire futures. An remained where he had always been, inside the storm, watching both sides, sending what he knew into the shadows. By the late stages of the war, the old order in Saigon was cracking. Confidence was fading. The Americans were reassessing. South Vietnam's political and military structure was under immense strain. Then came April 1975. Saigon was collapsing. Panic spread through the city. Helicopters lifted desperate evacuees from rooftops. Officials burned documents. Families were torn apart in hours. For many people, this was the final scene of a war. For Pham Xuan An, it was something even stranger. The secret life he had protected for decades was about to end. He had won, at least politically. The side he served was victorious. But history is rarely that simple, because one of the most revealing moments of Pham Xuan An's life did not come from triumph. It came from compassion. During the collapse of Saigon, An helped people he had once stood against. Among them was Dr. Tran Kim Nguyen, a major intelligence figure in South Vietnam. Think about the moral complexity of that. A revolutionary spy, at the very moment of victory, using his connections to help an enemy escape. Not because the war had not been real, not because loyalties did not matter, but because Pham Xuan An, for all his secrecy, was not a man made entirely of ideology. He was also a man of relationships, of personal debts, of human feeling. And maybe that is the part of his story that most confuses people who want history to be simple. They want heroes with clean edges, villains with clear labels, spies without tenderness. But real lives are not written like propaganda posters. They are messy, contradictory, painful. Pham Xuan An was a revolutionary officer who loved American journalism, a communist spy who formed real friendships with Americans, a man who helped defeat one side and still tried to save people from it. That is not a flaw in the story. That is the story. After 1975, Pham Xuan An's secret identity was gradually revealed. To many Americans who had known him, the shock was enormous. Imagine discovering that the thoughtful colleague you drank with, the reporter you trusted, the friend whose political insights you admired, had spent decades working for the other side. And yet, what is remarkable is not just that they were stunned, it is that many of them still respected him. Why? Because even those who felt betrayed often recognized something unusual in Pham Xuan An. He was not driven by greed, not by ego, not by cruelty, and not by the thrill of manipulation for its own sake. He believed he was serving his country. He believed Vietnam should not be controlled by foreign powers, and he carried out that mission with extraordinary discipline. Writers and researchers who later studied his life, most famously Larry Berman, found a man who defied easy judgment. A spy, yes, but also a thinker, a patriot, a lover of books, animals, conversation, and journalism. In later years, An lived a quieter life. He raised birds, cared for dogs, spoke with old friends, and reflected on a century that had forced too many Vietnamese to live between impossible choices. He had spent much of his life acting normal while carrying secrets that could kill him. And when the war was over, what remained was not just victory, it was memory. Memory of friendships that were real, even when built on silence. Memory of a country torn apart. Memory of a life so carefully divided that even in peace, some part of him could never be fully whole. So, was Pham Xuan An Vietnam's real-life James Bond? Yes and no. Yes, if by Bond you mean a man who lived behind a mask, moved between dangerous worlds, and changed history from the shadows. But no, if you mean glamour, gadgets, and the fantasy that espionage is exciting without being tragic. Because Pham Xuan An's story reminds us that the most powerful spies are not always the loudest, the coldest, or the most violent. Sometimes, they are the ones who understand people so deeply that everyone tells them the truth without realizing it. Sometimes, they are the ones who love a country enough to disappear inside another identity for decades. And sometimes, they are not defined by the secrets they stole, but by the human cost of carrying them. Pham Xuan An was not a myth. He was not a movie character. He was something far more unsettling and far more extraordinary. A man trusted by America who worked for Vietnam. A journalist who shaped a war from behind a notebook. A spy who proved that intelligence is not only about deception, but about insight, patience, and unbearable self-control. And maybe that is why, decades later, his story still feels unbelievable. Not because it sounds fictional, but because it is real. This was Pham Xuan An, the perfect spy, and this is Vietnam in 60 seconds. If you want more untold stories from Vietnam's past, stories of war, resilience, genius, and survival, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and tell us, was Pham Xuan An the most extraordinary spy of the 20th century? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.